Good morning, everybody. Bobby Ballesteros with OSC Medical. Today we've got Sharon Friedman.
I'm Sharon Friedman, and today I'm going to be talking about spine and my company's Life Balancing Therapies, but what I do is work with people who have bone density issues, helping them stay flexible, strong, confident, so they can go and enjoy their life without fear. So that is kind of my, what we're going to talk about today is how you can live without fear with osteoporosis, and that means talking about the spine. And that's what we're going to talk about is the spine this morning.
And what we want to also let you guys know is that this is our fourth segment in breathing that Sharon has done a really good job with. A lot of this is actually in segments. It's been cut into 6 pieces. We started off with number 1 that was just breathing, which I learned a lot at that point. And then the second one was about...
Oh my God, breath and movement.
Breath and movement.
Yeah.
So you think about this. First, we're just going to talk about breathing. Now we're going to talk about breath and movement. And then the third one was breathing and bending.
No, it was Tadasana. It was posture. Last week was posture, which we're going to continue on that. How do you have good posture? And again, repeating posture is basically how the bones and the joints and the muscles relate to each other position-wise in standing. So, you know, I hate to call it good posture and bad posture. I call it, there's good postural habits and there's bad postural habits. And they can cause problems to the spine, or the spine can cause problems to the posture. You know, it's not, you know, it's a chicken and the egg. It's a chicken and the egg thing. Which came first?
Right.
You know, who knows? But, you know, here's the question is, so why? Why is it important to have good spinal posture? And we talked about that a little bit, again, talking about the spine. I'm going to come close, okay? I'm going to come close here. The spine is attached, in the back, the spine is attached to the rib cage they actually look like door pivots, you know, door hinges. And the hinges open and close as you inhale. So when you have problems in your spine, you're going to have problems in your rib cage lifting and properly and opening, so for good breath. And also good heart health, which talks about when the spine, when the rib cage is inhibited, it puts pressure on the heart as you breathe. So that's one thing. So you've got 5 parts of your spine. You've got cervical, 7 of them. And she's a little flat. This is Shelley. Hi, Shelley. She's a little flat. There's a little usually of a curve. And then you've got your thoracic. There's 12 of those. And again, that's a little more like this than she is, but she's put together by wires, not by muscles. And then you have 5 vertebrae of your lumbar spine. And then you also have, this looks like one bone here. Oops, okay. But it's really 5 different bones called the sacrum, and that's the last, and this is the tailbone. This is the last bone of the whole spine. And then they're connected to the ilions to hold the pelvis together. And that's another, this whole thing is a whole discussion right there. But, so when, in breathing, so when you inhale, we talked about that, if you go back to the first video, the diaphragm pulls down, lifts the rib cage up, and opens it. But if the muscles are too tight, that's not going to happen. And then there's a muscle that connects all the way up here, up into the rib cage, down, and attaches all the way to all the lumbar spines, go through the pelvis, and attaches to the inside of the thigh bone. Which means that if you can't take a deep breath, you're going to have, if those are tight, you start having lordosis, a big curve in your thoracic. And that's when you start getting sciatica and herniated disc, and all kinds of things like that. Neck aches, back aches, arthritis, spondylolisthesis, which I have, or different kinds of back issues. And that can be just from poor posture, but how do you correct poor posture is by working the spine. And how do you work the spine? And the spine goes in 6 different directions, 5 or 6 different directions. You've got axial extension, which is this. I think Bobby's at axial extension right now. And then you have forward bending. I'm going to have Bobby, we did that last week when we did posture. So notice how when Shelley forward bends, she's forward bending from her hip joint, from her back here. And most people do this, and I gotta be careful because I want to break her. They do this.
They bend at
They bend at here. And I'm gonna go back again, getting really close. These vertebrae are really thick, and they have these big spinal process. And they're there not to protect all the organs down here, so you don't want to bend at the waist, you want to bend at the hip. So that's forward bending, and forward bending stretches the back. And then there's back bending that stretches the front. Again, there's only one place we're really mobile in our spine, and that is about right here. Okay. I'm going to have you turn around. I'm going to turn all the way around. So here's the bottom of the ribs, and here's the start of the lumbar spine. And this is where we have mobility to rotate. Nope, don't turn your hips. Rotate. So he's not very mobile. I can tell you right now, he's using his whole body to rotate, and he's not doing any movement in here. Not good. So I know where we need to work, don't we? And then there's lateral bending. And notice again, I'm going to lateral bend. Okay, so I'm laterally bending, and at one point then I can, again, from that space between the lumbar spines and where the lumbar spine and the thoracic start to connect, I can gently bend there. But I can't bend here, and I don't want to bend here. So you really have to work, actually, there's a lot of abdominal muscle engagement there to engage the spine and leave it safe so that you can move properly. So with all that information, you have questions?
So a quick question, is I work with athletes and we're always trying to promote proper posture. Now we're going into breathing and bending and all these positions. How does this affect an athlete? How can they benefit from this?
Well, I mean, I'm not a physical trainer and I'm not a physician, so just from my own, my own personal knowledge is that when you're working in the proper posture positions, you're using muscles properly. And when you use muscle properly, we talked about the brain. Last week we talked about the brain uses 90% of its capacity to keep us upright and in our body safe, so we don't harm ourselves. So your brain is having to figure out another percentage of its brain of how to work the muscles so that it doesn't harm you. So you're working less efficiently mentally if your body's trying to keep you from harming yourself. And again, if anybody's ever done this, they bent down, twisted, and lifted, and then then their back hurts. So when you bend down, you have to bend your knees, and you have to sit back and exhale, and pick it up, and then inhale, and lift the whole body up instead of kind of rounding the body up, because it puts too much pressure on your lumbar spine and all those muscles that are basically just there to hold you up in time and space, not to lift you. Those are not lifting muscles. Those are postural holding muscles. And it's really important to use the muscles that are, used, we're machines. We're just machines. We're machines holding a soul, I believe that. But the body is just a machine, and if you don't work it properly, just like any other machine, you're going to break it.
Right.
And then you got to fix it.
Then you got to fix it.
Then you got to fix it.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, and then the fixing, at least with our bodies, I don't know about you, but once you break something in our body, it never goes back to the same. It's always at a deficit.
In the medical field, it never goes back 100%. That's the problem, because you've got scar tissue, you've got resistance, you've got limited range of motion, you've got a lot of things going on. But more importantly, with what she's saying is that, you can damage yourself in 30 minutes. It could take 6 weeks for it to heal, and that doesn't even mean you're going to get 100%. So I get athletes that sprain an ankle or twist an ankle, and that's 4 weeks. That's 6 weeks of healing.
Just healing,
Just healing.
not even start to work. Yeah, and again, I said before, and I hurt my back. I've got spondylolisthesis, which is basically one vertebrae that goes forward of all the other vertebrae, and the disc starts touching the spine. And I'm fine now. But I have to always watch what I do, and I always have to do my physical therapy or PT or strengthening, because it's a weakened muscle. And muscles, again, we talked about it. Once muscles are weakened, they're at risk to always be weak. They never really go back to full. I mean, not muscles, ligaments, the smaller muscles.
Right.
Muscles heal, but ligaments never really do. And so if you can avoid hurting yourself by doing proper mechanics, and that's what I'm talking about here. This today is about proper mechanics of the spine. And that is so important. I mean, if anybody back there in Facebook land has hurt their back, lumbar, thoracics will actually crack ribs. When you have osteoporosis, you crack a lot of ribs. Neck injuries, things like that. You know that for the rest of your life, you're going to be working to avoid it. And so just want to talk a little bit of science here, okay? A little bit of science that I learned while I was learning about osteoporosis, is that our bones are always remodeling, always in remodeling. There's these little, and I'll analyze it, there's these little cells called osteoclasts that clean up, they're the little cleaner cells. They clean up old bone. And it's like hairs falling out, skin changes, our bones are constantly, getting old and having to be replaced. Then there's this thing called osteoblasts that are like eye analysis, that you got a wall here and it's cracking. So you got to go and scrape off the old wall. Those are the osteoclasts. And then you have to put new plaster on. Those are the osteoblasts. And then you have to wait for it to dry. But meanwhile, the osteoclast comes in and cleans up the plaster a little bit, smoothing it off. And then the guy comes and plasters a little bit more, just like you fix a wall. Right. And it takes a long time for that to happen. But over time, you get new solid bone. And how does that happen? Before we hit 30, it was happening by growth hormones and all different things that were happening without us even really working about it. But when all of us hit 30, our growth stops, because we weren't programmed to live past like 70 or 80. We're living way past that now. So our body is still thinking we're going to die at 70, and so all those processes, and we start atrophying at 30. Ask any 40-year-old, they'll tell you. I'm 67, I'll tell you. You have to work harder as you get older to stay young. So I think, getting back to my osteoporosis. So Dr. Fishman, who I trained under, says, he's a physioscientist that did a 20-year study on this. He says that you can have a bone bank. You can, men tend to be thicker boned than women. And there's some women who are thicker. So the more bone you have, the more you're able to lose. And everybody loses at least 10% of their bone around 50 to 60 years old. Everybody. We all do. But if you have a lot of bone, it's not a big deal. But if you're thin bone, it's a big deal. Right. And that's where osteoporosis comes in, unless you have other, physical, medical issues. So this thing called, Wolff's Law. And it states that when you pull a muscle away from the bone, it actually activates the bone remodeling process. So it takes 12 seconds to activate that. And you can stay there for 72 seconds, and then after the activation stops. So you can build bone all day long. You can do a yoga, and here it is. You can do a yoga pose, which I'll call it, I'm going to show a yoga pose in just a second. But if you do a yoga pose and engage internally, not externally, like it's not about your biceps, it's not about your triceps, it's not about your thighs, it's a little bit about your thighs, but it's more about connecting and pulling the bone away from another bone, that you can build bone tissue manually, basically. So I'm going to put Shelley down. Thank you, Shelley, for being such a help.
So one of the big things is we talk about what allows the body to heal a lot better. Oxygen is probably
Yes.
one of the best things you can have, or the best thing you can have, for circulation, for healing, for all these things. So this is why breathing is a big topic for us, is because it is probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because if you're not
Thank you.
breathing,
Thank you
then
for-
we're
yes, I was
not.
going to say, that was one of my points, is that breathing is very important to the process because it oxygenates and gives the muscles power to heal. That's true, yeah.
So this is why, I think this is something, helping people understand the importance of what your breathing does for you. And I think a lot of people, like she did mention, take this for granted. We don't really think about breathing, but then we don't think about our posture either. And I've heard chiropractors say that, how long does it take for the body to change in structure? And I think somebody told me that it was 4 days,
Really?
where somebody that can be sitting like this, all of a sudden they start hunching and they start getting technic. Right about day 4, your body is really accustomed and comfortable here, but is that the right position? It's not.
Yeah.
Because like we talked last week, that as soon as you start hunching down, you squeeze your lungs, you can't breathe as well. You're actually taking away from the body itself. So this is why when we correct, thank you, Sharon, and we breathe and open our lungs. I've come to realize that there was more to this than even I understood. So it's been really nice to have an interaction with somebody that really goes a little bit deeper than I do into different parts of the body and how these things really help us heal and maintain ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I'm going to be the wall, okay? Because I'm going to do it. Actually, I'm going to do a forward bend because we've already done forward bending. Because I don't want to do back bend because that'll take away from my back bend. So again, I'm going to have Bobby do a forward bend, and he's going to get his feet correct. They're not correct right now. He's going to get into his Tadasana, which is a little bit closer. Remember, hip, knee, second and third toe. So to stay, that gives you hips width apart. And he's going to soften his knees because he's got them really tight. And he's going to inhale, nice and tall, and he's going to exhale. He's going to bend his knees, push his hip back, and lean forward. Keep bending your knees. Keep bending your knees. Keep bending your knees. Keep bending your knees. And I'm going to turn him sideways. Can you turn him sideways? So this is a forward bend. He's got a nice flat back. But how's he going to stretch his back? He's going to, right at this point, he's going to see if he can drop the head. See, his lumbar spine is still long. And most people, this gets really like a camel. And then he's going to lift his head, lift his chest, and come up. How'd that feel?
yeah.
So we'll do it one more time. We're going to inhale, nice and long. Inhale, nice and long. Inhale, push, inhale. Get that this is axle extension. Inhale is axle extension. Exhale is going to pull his belly in, bend his knees, send his hips back, lean, send forward. At this point, he can now drop his head and stretch a little bit more. And bend your knees a little bit more. I can now feel his spine lengthening, his muscles lengthening as the more he bends his knees, the more he gets into, feel that? The more you get into your lumbar spine. So now he's stretching his back body and he's opening up all those, remember see those little vertebrae and the little discs that you saw on Shelley? Those are getting opened and he's giving space to all those discs and those are getting hydrated by his breath and just stretching. And then he's going to try to keep this length by first bringing the head back up and now he's going to, I'm going to bring the, see if I can put my hand here. He's going to, you're going to lift. Feel a little taller? And he stretched his back.
And for the
How's that
longest time, I always thought, just coming down and stretching my back was a good thing, and now I've actually changed some of the ways that I stretch my back out, because I think we all have our own thoughts on of what stretching our back really is, but.
Well, the thing is that when people stretch their back, they think it's important to stretch their hamstrings, and it's really not. Because you can overstretch your hamstrings, and hamstrings are there, I can tell you, for support of your knees, engagement of your knees, very important. So when you overstretch your hamstrings, you start losing integrity in your sacrum, and you also lose integrity in your knees. So overstretching your hamstrings is a really bad thing. So when you're doing a forward bend, the more you release your hamstrings, the more you can get into your lumbar spine. And really it's about your lumbar. We can live without hamstrings. We really can. cannot live without a lumbar spine. We can live with hamstrings that aren't so happy, but we can't live with an unhappy lumbar spine. So just, my suggestion for this particular video is if you're gonna bend forward, then you squat and bend down and let your lumbar, and then remember again, come here. Remember he did a forward bend? He started to bend forward after once he straightened his spine. He started to bend forward more through here. He could take that, he had mobility in that place where he could actually bend a little bit more and stretch the back, but he couldn't do it here and he couldn't do it here. Did you feel that?
Right.
The integrity stayed here and the integrity stayed here, but that was, and this is really important to have this mobile, and we'll talk about this, I think it's the last one, twisting. These have to be very mobile. These have to be very mobile for twisting to happen. You can't rotate, as you notice, if that's not mobile. And I was feeling your back, and you're really tight here. So I hope that you've enjoyed the information I've given you about your spine, your bones, the whole, your skeleton is where we live. Without a strong skeletal body, we can't get around.
Right.
And so the muscles support that. And muscles are important, but muscles are only as good as their flexibility. So we can overstrengthen our muscles and cause immense damage to our bones. So flexibility is the key, and breathing is part of will help flexibility.
And for a lot of you athletes out there, flexibility is very important.
Extremely.
Oxygen in your bones, very important. Oxygen in your body, very important. Breathing, very important. Lifting and breathing, all these things. And if you haven't had a chance to actually do what we just did, I would actually advise everybody to give it a shot. Really feel the difference, because I felt it in my lower back. I felt the actual stretching of my back. I mean, I could actually feel it. So if you haven't tried it, try it. I'd like for you guys to send any questions, comments, what you think. If you tried it, let me know what you felt.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah. If you have any questions about what you should be feeling, where you should be bending, where you should be not bending, when this goes, I'm telling you, I know from personal experience, when this goes, when this is no longer strong enough, or it's hurt, or it's broken, life comes to a very halting stop.
And I want you to think about this as you're walking on a daily basis, and you're in a grocery store, you're at a mall, you're walking down the street, you're at a park, and I want you to take a time and just look at the way, because this is what I do. I'm a pedordo, so I analyze people as they're walking, but really look at how people are walking, and you'll see the ones that are walking, their arms are moving. You'll watch the ones that are walking like this. Realize what is actually happening to their body, what's actually happened to their bone structure, what's happened to their range of motion. What have we limited, and what have we taken away from the body?
And they're probably not breathing, I'm telling you, they're probably not breathing properly. They're probably breathing very short breath.
You're almost panting.
Yeah, which try that for a minute. Try very short breath, panting, and feel how even your abdominal muscles start to clench and everything clenches. But try then to take a long breath, and all of a sudden you feel the muscles opening and releasing, and that makes a difference in walking and standing and getting up out of a chair and thinking. I mean, a healthy spine, because what goes down the spine is the nervous system and a lot of the circulatory vessels and things like that. What goes down the spine affects our mind, and how it goes down the spine affects our mind. And we can I say, you can get rid of a lot of stress by just breathing and proper posture. Those two things, pretty easy.
Things can become easier when you apply yourself to taking care of yourself, and that's something that I've really looked at, and it's something that I try to relay to my clients, is that this is all about taking care of yourselves. You're here for this reason. You're here because you want that education. You want to go forward. You want to be a stronger, healthier individual. So, and I want you guys to know that Sharon does teach yoga. She does teach these things in her class, and she does this at.
I'm on Zoom right now, and I have a studio in my home. So hopefully things will open up. And I also do teach one other thing, and it's called Sunflower Gyrotonics. on Johnson Drive, around Lamar. I don't know between Lamar and Knoll. I teach a yoga for brain health and brain resilience, which again, when you lower the stress of the brain, you increase the mobility of your body and the resilience of your mind and heart and everything. So it's all, doing fast yoga is great. It's cardio, it's wonderful, but it's what we do all the time, and it's stressing us all the time. And our bodies need de-stressing too. And so movement that's de-stressing is an interesting thing to do movement that de-stresses you, not stresses you. So you may want to give that a try too.
So try the stretching. Let's all breathe together, have a better life.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, next week we'll do. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Just now.
I just sighed before we started, but we'll be back next Tuesday.
Yeah, next week, and we'll be a little bit more. Oh, it was backbending.
Backbending.
It was backbending. We'll talk about backbending, and that's a whole different thing. So I hope you look forward to learning about the backbend.
Thank you guys for your time. We'll
Watch
see
Bobby
you
do a
next
backbend next week.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that'll be really nice to watch. Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Okay, how long was it?
26 minutes.
Okay. How did we do last week?